Sometimes in business, listeners, the numbers, they feel like shadows. They're always present, shaping our decisions, yet hard to hold on to. We chase growth, chase sales, and yet it often comes down to one stubborn question. Do we really understand our cash flow? Well, welcome back, listeners, to today's episode on the BizBlend Podcast. And I'm your host, Sana. And I am joined by someone who has walked through the highs of entrepreneurship and the struggles of uncertainty. He's a seasoned entrepreneur who has been building businesses since 1999, survived the crash of 2008, and turned hard learned lessons into a tool that helps other business owners gain clarity. Dryrun, a financial forecasting software. So this isn't just about, those Excel sheets or spreadsheets or for projections. It is about resilience, adaptability, and what it really takes to keep your business alive when the world is right now feeling uncertain. So let's quickly dive in and please welcome my esteemed guest, Blaine Bertsch. So, Blaine, welcome to the show, and I'm really, really pumped up for this conversation.
Oh, thanks for having me, Santa. Me as well.
Super. Okay. Um, I mean, you have been building businesses, since the 90s. Then you have also gone through the 2008 crisis. Um, you have also seen the pandemic. I mean, some major, major global events, some huge shifts in there, Blaine. So I'm very, very sure there will be definitely some interesting, very surprising insights in there for our listeners. But um, let's try to understand the cash flow forecasting here. You have said that it was born out of necessity during the 2008 recession. Um,
Yes.
if you could just give a glimpse of that entire, course of events, was there a specific moment when you thought, you had to think about it or do something, or was it like series of events?
Uh, there were a series of moments, I guess. Back in the around that 2008 time, my previous business was a creative agency, and so we were building. We were doing a lot of video production, online learning materials, and websites. We even were building things like kiosks that went into like one of the government buildings in town, so we were growing really quite rapidly, and I think, like, even 2006, 2007, we were expanding our team, we expanded our office, we were, doing a lot of traveling, looking for larger deals and bigger opportunities, and on the tech side, we were building some really interesting things, um, and then it was this kind of almost started as a rumor of a recession, and, it that's what it felt like, and, um and then suddenly it started to actually hit, and so I think around that time, about 70% of our clientele were government agencies, and
Okay.
they were the first to close. They started to slam their budgets shut, and that's when you start to realize it goes from this long-term vision of how you're growing the business and expanding and to suddenly it felt like overnight it
Yeah.
just turned to, "Do I have enough money to make payroll on Friday?" Because we didn't wanna lay anybody off, and it just in my mind, it was a slower transition than that, but in my mind, it feels like it was just it turned on a dime, and,
Mm,
suddenly, it just flipped from growth to survival.
yeah. Yeah. No. Yeah. I can uh make some of some sense of it because although personally, I wasn't at that stage of life to be affected by the 2008 recession, but we have seen the pandemic in there. I mean, how much economically, it has affected, and then right now as well, we are seeing some strange, challenging, uncertain times in there, uh, whether it's geopolitics or whether it's economic uncertainty. So Definitely. Thank you for shining light on that, Blaine. Now, from an entrepreneur perspective, do you think most of them truly understand the urgency of cash flow, or do they only learn it the hard way?
I you know, I would say that too many of them learn it the hard way. We see that every day, and um, too often businesses are coming to us when they're already in trouble, and that's a really challenging place to be. And one of the things that we do is we're very focused on looking forward, and that's how you see some of the storms coming. That's how you adapt to things. And years ago, I wrote a book for just for small business owners. It's called Chronic Cash Flow, and one of the examples I give in there is, from a cash flow perspective, it's like stepping off the curb in front of a bus. If
Oh,
you look and the bus is 3 blocks away, you got all the time in the world to decide, do you go back? Do you cross the street? Do you wave them down? You've got options. But if you step off the curb in front of a bus and it's right there, you're just gonna get hit. And it's a similar thing with cash flow. If you can see far enough down the road, and it's not gonna be 100%, but it doesn't have to be. If you can see down the road, it gives you options. It gives you the ability to adapt, to adjust, to talk with a bank, to do all of these different things. And too often we see businesses that they're running from what's in their bank account, and they see very little down the road, and it just seems to be crisis to crisis to crisis.
hmm. Hmm. Yeah, that makes sense. And of course, I mean, the way you said it, I think it might echo what so many of us have felt, not just with respect to entrepreneurs, but us, like that moment of panic when we realize the bank account balance doesn't match the optimism in our pipeline. So it feels universal, but it's rarely spoken about because this kind of a feeling of failure or shame or a helplessness in there. And uh, while managing cash flow, what kind of mistakes do you see entrepreneurs repeat again and again? Is it, and especially for, early stage startups or companies which have some bold plans out there? I mean, they focus on rapid scaling or rapid growth. What kind of mistakes
Mhm.
do you?
It tends to be, entrepreneurs are optimistic by nature. We're all optimistic, otherwise we wouldn't be doing this. And a lot of times it's just, there has to be some realism and some frankness brought into the view of the business and where you're going. And it's not just startups. Like, I will tell you, this is not just startups, it's not just small business. I was literally less than an hour ago, I was talking with a CFO, that was, sort of brought in to help a company, um, try and get their feet back under them, and she said to me that it ended up being, wrapping up the business because they had expanded so rapidly, and this was north of 50,000,000, and they had expanded so rapidly. And you really hit the nail on the head when you said the pipeline was built on dreams. It wasn't there to support the business. There was no way the sales could, come fast enough to remedy it. And so this happens in mid-sized businesses. It happens in much larger businesses, as well. It's not just small business, but the problems can often be the same. And you mentioned, it's you're building a business, you're forecasting your cash flow. Well, of course, you're forecasting your expenses and what's going out, um, and who owes you money and what's coming in. But it's that pipeline that is really important to forecast as well. And so, like, even my own forecast in Dryrun, I have buckets of, um, uh, that are opportunities that are in our pipeline, and I have a quite a conservative, probability attached to them. And I'm always watching, are our probabilities about right? Because that's how you also get a realistic view of the deals that you have in your pipeline. How likely are they to turn into cash, and when will they likely turn into cash, and when does that come into the business? How does the timing work with the money you have to spend to pay staff and to pay contractors? Um, and as the businesses grow, I've heard, more than once CFOs say to me, "It's just another zero." In other words, whether you're a $500,000 company, a $5 million company, a $50 million company, a $500 million company, the businesses get a lot more complex, but the problem can still sometimes fundamentally be the same, where they haven't looked far enough ahead, and they haven't reconciled, this belief that they have in sales versus what will actually come in the door.
Hmm. Mm. I no, no, like the tension here because um, entrepreneurs, I mean, they thrive on creativity, but I think without structure, things definitely collapse. And I think many listeners, they are balancing exactly that line right now. Um,
Mhm,
talking about structure in there, and as we um, have heard about the mistakes in there, what are the prerequisites in there, Blaine? Like, if we want to maintain a positive cash flow, if we want to make sure that, like in layman terms, we talk about rainy day savings and stuff.
mhm.
What are the prerequisites in there that we have to make sure or be mindful of?
You know what, I think the big thing is, and I always recommend this to even some of the really large businesses that we'll often work with, just start simple. It's easy to try and build something that covers every single penny, and you don't have to be we don't have to be that perfect at all. Start simple and just get a sense of where you're going, and I think sometimes, especially with smaller businesses, um, I've heard more than once that where founders and business owners have said to me, truthfully, "I don't really wanna know." Like, they're scared to know where the business is headed. All I can say is that when you actually see it, it'll put your mind at ease. It will help immensely because you can go from this, unknowns that can be really scary to
Mhm.
problem solving and being able to say, "Hey, best case scenarios, geez, we're in better shape than I thought," and that can happen. Or
But
we're in worse shape, but I think I can see a way through it. I think I can find a way. Um, but fundamentally, it's this is the way that I approached cash flow back in my past business. This is kind of fundamentally how Dryrun is. We recommend getting it set up as just as this easy starting point. um,
okay.
Forecast your revenue, and then on the near term, if especially if you're a business that sends out invoices and you're waiting on those payments, um, don't just look at the amount of money people owe you, but with the timing of them. So, near term, they always talk about 13 weeks. It's just a general, hey, in the next 3 months, what dollars do you expect to come in that you already have under contract? Or if you're even cash sales, you can kind of see a bit of the seasonality and say, okay, this is what I think is going to come in. And then longer term forecast out, try and get to that 6 months, a year and past, just to give it something to look at, something based on maybe the previous year, some sort of, try and just be realistic. And then I recommend tracking the outflows that are irregular. So in other words, if you have the big bills, you have a big insurance bill coming in, you have to pay a contractor, you have to buy inventory, you have to buy materials, separate those out so you know exactly the timing of the big transactions. And then the third thing to look at is just your fixed expenses. What is your payroll, your rent, your all those ongoing costs, your software costs, your phones, all the things like that. Forecast those as well. And yeah, and you can even do this in a spreadsheet, or you can come and talk with us and we can show you how we do it. And for some small businesses, a spreadsheet will be more than enough. But try and project at least 3 months out, and then move past that and just keep it simple. The big dollars in, the dollars in, the dollars out, and what are those regular fixed expenses? How much does it cost to stay in business every month? Um, and it's not too difficult to build that, but it will really help you understand where you're going, and you can build on top of that as you move forward.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah. I think those are some really good insights out there when it comes to, first of all, preparing ourselves to kind of encounter, or maybe see the reality in there, or just accept it with clarity and then think about the way out there. And I'm also curious to know, Blaine, I mean, you have seen the 2008 recession, um, and now we have all these global events happening. um, there are situations where you do not have control over the prevailing circumstances, some kind of a systemic changes in there. For example, during pandemic, physical businesses completely came to standstill. Many companies had to adopt to online, whether it's
Mm.
edtech or it's restaurants, or any food industry, or any kind of industry. um, what how do you suggest, uh, how we can be prepared for these kind of scenarios? Entrepreneurs can be prepared for these kind of scenarios. Does having that assurance of that I am very much aware about my cash flow, my situation in there, and I'm ready to navigate these kind of uncertain situations, sudden shocks. So what's your thought
Yeah.
on it?
Yeah, and well, first of all, I'll say that what we're going through now for the last 5 years, or close to 5 years is worse than what I experienced in 2008, 2009. When the pandemic hit, it completely disrupted businesses, and some of them, were, honestly put out of business, honestly, immediately. Um, and then there's some businesses that actually grew really rapidly because of it.
Yes.
But then, as the world started to open up, they, like we had talked about, grew too fast, and they weren't prepared for that, and suddenly they were struggling even at a later date, and then
Mm.
now with, like you've seen inflation and all these uncertainties and tariffs and all these things that are going on, it can just be really so challenging for businesses, and there doesn't seem to be a let up. What we recommend all the time, and personally, what I do is I always have, usually I'll do it like a best, worst, and likely scenario, but at the very minimum, I have a baseline scenario that is a little bit of that worst case scenario, and then I'll start to build out some other scenarios based on, um, yeah, usually a best case, a worst case, and a likely kinda case that sits in the middle, but I'll at least go, like, here's a baseline scenario. Here's if, if things don't open up or they don't change, or or things hit the brakes again, what does it look like, and how can we work our way through it? And where can we maybe cut costs? Are there places where we can, generate a little bit of revenue that, might really help us sustain in a really tough time? And then also tracking some of the other scenarios, because if things start to really run, sometimes fast growth can be one of the most dangerous things for a business, and because they're not really planning for it, and it's like, we're growing, we're gonna buy, and those don't necessarily line up. The revenue doesn't necessarily continue the way that they thought. Um, so I recommend always keeping and maintaining those forecasts. So not just maintaining, a cash flow forecast, but a bit of that best case and worst case as well, so that, you can prepare for that. And then, of course, you know, it's always recommended to keep some cash on hand.
Mhm.
Usually people recommend, if possible, keep 3 months of cash that you'll need to cover all of your expenses on hand, so that if things, like, grind to a halt, you've got some room to move. The longer, the better, but we also know it's almost impossible to do that. That's really hard for a lot of businesses now to build up a bankroll that can just sit there for a rainy day. Um, but if you can, it's highly recommended. So in other words, I would always try and, not be too aggressive on your spending and on your growth. Keep some money back if you can.
No, no, absolutely, absolutely. I don't know about others, but I personally 500% agree with you, Blaine, on this. Absolutely. Okay, now talking about your journey, Blaine. I mean, as a tech founder. It's very interesting. I mean, you have made quote unquote every mistake in the book, as you put it. Um, do you believe mistakes are truly essential for growth, or could entrepreneurs avoid some of them by listening to other stories and journeys like yours?
Oh, yeah, talking with other entrepreneurs and listening to their experiences can help, um, help some dodge some of those mistakes, like, building especially building a tech business like the one we're building here, your chance of success is about 1 in 10. You're gonna make you're going to make mistakes, there's no way around it, but trying to avoid them is, it's kind of essential too. Um, but those mistakes, if you're really on top of things, and they can oftentimes be a really good learning experience and not necessarily fatal for the business. And I always recommend talking with other entrepreneurs, and the closer to what you're trying to tackle, that they've done, the more, oftentimes the more insightful their stories will be. Um, I do tend to rank entrepreneurs much higher. Other entrepreneurs, the advice or the insights I get from them has proven to usually be more beneficial to me than some type of sort of an advisor or coach that hasn't actually done it. Because things are so much more complicated and complex than than anyone really thinks. But yeah, talk with people, and the harder sometimes business gets, sometimes the more introverted entrepreneurs will become because they're just so focused on what they're doing. But talk with other entrepreneurs, and because it'll be good for you, it'll be good for them, and you may learn something really valuable, and it may just be that it'll just help to know that other people are struggling with some of the same things you are.
That is a really, really honest take on their Blaine, isn't it, listeners? Um, Wonderful, wonderful. And I don't know, that's a valid question or not, Blaine, but let's say you're given a time machine and you could time travel back. Is there one mistake you would absolutely avoid, even though it taught you something? But yeah.
Yeah, I would say, like, we've gone through a really big pivot recently, and we had to almost rebuild the software and almost the entire business, and the reason is because we realized our greatest opportunity were with businesses that were a little larger than we thought, and it was much more of mid-market. So even though we help small business and we can help small business, mid-market tended to be where the biggest, um, struggles were and where we could help the most, which means that's where the best market for us, really is. Um,
Mhm,
when we first started to conceive of Dryrun and when we first launched Dryrun,
mhm.
we talked with potential customers all of the time. The mistake I think we made is we talked with a very narrow group that we
Mm,
had already decided these are our customers, and so it was kinda confirmation bias. It's like just over and over again talking to the same people, and they're telling us the same things.
mm,
We didn't stretch out and start to look at, well, what other markets are out there? Who should we maybe be talking to? Who might we be missing?
mm.
I think if we had done that, that would have actually helped us identify where we really needed to be, sooner than we did.
No, that's once again, that's a brilliant one. I mean, unfortunately, fortunately, um, and I think in um, exploring new markets and um, pitching, or not exactly pitching, but introducing your product or service to new customers, you get a lot of feedbacks in there. Um, and sometimes those feedbacks can be a bit intimidating because it will kind of expose some of the drawbacks of your service or product,
Yeah.
which in the long way will definitely help you in making your product or service more appealing, more sellable. So has this kind of situation happened with you, Blaine? I mean, if you got a constructive negative feedback, but a constructive one, how exactly did you apply it into dry run?
Yeah, early on, we really tried to talk with as many people as we could, and we thought we were doing a lot with the feedback, like, but I think in a lot of ways there were times where we had already decided where we were going, and if it didn't fit into our narrative, we were a bit dismissive. Um, it didn't feel like it at the time. It felt like we were considering everything, but truthfully, I think we were a bit dismissive, and we've changed our going through the pivot here has been, it was such a hard pivot and so many hard lessons learned. But what we found was talking with people, and sometimes it was tricky. It was intimidating to, I remember some of the first conversations we had with CFOs in businesses that were in the hundreds of millions of dollars, and I'm just like, I don't know. If it was almost an imposter syndrome. I'm like, "I don't know what I'm doing, they're gonna just tear us apart." That was my belief, but I thought, "We're still gonna talk with them." And then to have them come in and go, "Wow, you guys are doing so I do," and just this encouragement was really important, but it also we started to realize these are the people that have the biggest problem. They're coming in begging us for help, and we wouldn't have found that if we hadn't been open to, talking with them. But then on top of it, we needed some pretty, detailed feedback on the actual technology, and it was, um, a lot of I wouldn't call it criticism, constructive criticism or more like gaps that we had to fill, and,
Like, how you
it was so valuable, and once we started to get that feedback and really understand where we were headed, as a team, we started to get almost obsessed with this feedback, and so now we have systems in place where, every meeting that any one of our team has, there's some notes that's shared with the rest of the team, just so, especially if there's something really sort of pivotal or important in there, always
Mhm.
shared, and everybody always wants to read it and find out, "Well, what did they say? What did they say?" Because we've gotten past the point where we sort of take things personally, or we just want the data, we want the information, we want the feedback, and that's really transformed how we've developed our product and what decisions we make and how we prioritize in product, because we're getting tons of valuable feedback. And of course, you're not just following blindly, you're learning, asking why for everything, so you can kinda get a handle on, why is something important? Will it help other people? And it really helps to, get a bigger picture with a lot of feedback and prioritize what we're doing. It's been, completely, yeah, a game changer for us. So that's the one thing that I would share with anyone listening is just talk with your customers, talk with those potential customers, and, encourage and best beg for feedback, beg for honesty. Tell us what you think. Walk us through. Can we watch you using the product? Can we, anything you can to get information. It's just that's your IP. Like, it's so valuable to have all of that information coming back to you.
Absolutely. That's such an important, vital business lesson you gave in there, Blaine. Um, and it's kind of a blessing in disguise. It has been a blessing in disguise, of course. Okay. And before we conclude, I think this has to be brought in now because you know you are in the tech industry, and I think, yeah, of course, it's a necessary kind of evil in here, but AI tools advancing rapidly. I mean, do you, some people would say here, Blaine, that forecasting and financial clarity, they will be or they can be fully automated soon. So, do you think entrepreneurs will still need to understand cash flow deeply, or will software replace that thinking?
Uh, I think, software will be incredibly valuable to offer insights. It won't replace. Um, it won't replace anything, and in fact, the more we see what AI is capable of, there are some areas that it's really, really, really powerful, and we're absolutely excited by it because it's how can we help our customers understand better where they're going and do things faster and give them insights. Um, but running a business is there's so many moving parts and there's so many things that people make connections between things that won't make sense to a machine. In fact, a machine doesn't have a lot of the information that people do. So it
Mm,
has a data set that it can analyze, but I've been in business for a long time and I know just because people all start using AI doesn't mean that businesses will start paying each other on time. It's not going to happen. If they don't have the money, they're not going to pay and they're not going to share that information. And so I know business is still built on relationships between people and getting a bit of a sense of whether this business that you're working with, will they actually be able to pay? Will they pay on time? Are there opportunities coming up? Are there jobs coming up that you didn't know about? There is so much there that machines don't they can't do that. That's just not what they're there for, and they
mm,
don't have all that insight. But it's amazing how much they can help, how much insight they can give and how much they can speed things up, and that one of the biggest challenges, though, is for people to be able to say, "Okay, this is the machine has a very, it has a very focused data set, and it can tell me this. Does how do I take that with the information that I see, what's happening in my industry or what's coming down the road or talking with my customers?
mm.
How do I reconcile those and put it together and help move forward with all of this information?" Um, but yeah, I think I think that the what the machines will be capable of, what AI is capable of, um, I think it'll settle into a place where it'll be very helpful for people. It'll replace some tasks, of course. I think it's highly optimistic to think that a CFO and a CEO will be replaced by a machine, and the
Mm.
business will somehow keep running properly. I don't think that's very, very likely to happen.
No, no, no. You really gave a very legitimate, you know, argument in there. Yes, businesses are built on relationships and trust, something which machine can't, uh, you know, imitate, or they can't do it simply. So yeah, that really makes a lot of sense. And that's a really great answer, Blaine. And of course, if our listeners, if they would like to explore Dry Run, they would also like to connect with you, what should be the easiest way?
Yeah, you can come visit us at dryrun.com. If you are, just want to consider like, hey, can this help me understand where we're going as a business, save us some time, bring some accuracy into things? Just click on and book a demo with our team, and we'll meet with you. We can walk you through Dryrun, find out about your business, and we'll just see if it might be a potential fit for you. And you can also find me on LinkedIn, and feel free to connect with me there and send me a message there as well. Would love to hear from you.
Super. I'll make sure for all of your listeners to share all the details and links in the show notes for your easy reference. And um, what I take away from today's discussion, about cash flow, that it isn't just numbers. I think it's kind of the lifeline of a business. It reflects not only how we sell or spend, but how we adapt, how we plan, how we survive uncertainty. So, Blaine, thank you so much for showing us that mistakes aren't the end of the story. They are part of the blueprint for building better, efficient systems, stronger companies, and, of course, more resilient leaders.
Thank you so much, Sam. I really enjoyed our conversation.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely, Blame. So listeners, one more thing. I think this also has to be mentioned that what I also get a lot from Blaine's insights is, a sense of clarity in there. Clarity is power, and the health of your business comes down to whether you choose to face the numbers or ignore them. So, thank you for tuning into this episode of BizBlend. Until next time, keep building with both courage and clarity. Thank you.